Well, welcome everyone. Today is Sabbath, July 23rd, 2022, and I want to welcome you warmly to this study. And this is going to be part two of our continuing study of the Sabbath. And when we began a couple of weeks ago on this topic, I mentioned that this would be a several part series. I haven't quite decided yet how many parts that will be, but there's a lot more that I want to say about the Sabbath, and I want to take it slowly so that we can absorb everything and and see some interesting things in the scripture. So we'll just take it easy, and we'll finish when we finish. So today is part two of our study on the Sabbath. So I'd like to take us to the document prepared by the folks at the Bible Project, which is, as I mentioned last time, which is the what we are using as the basis of our study, the framework of our study. So that should come across your screen in just a moment here. So this is the series of notes from the Bible Project, and I'll just point out a couple of things in review, and then we'll move on to the material for today. So we talked last time that the Sabbath is there are a few texts in the scriptures that give us the sense of the meaning of the Sabbath, and three of the main texts are the ones that we find in Exodus 20:8-11, Deuteronomy 5:12-15, and Leviticus 23:3. So we're told in Exodus 20 that the Sabbath is important to remember because there's a tie back to creation. Yahweh made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them in 6 days, and then he rested. The Hebrew word is Shabbat, from which we get our English word Sabbath, on the seventh day. Then Deuteronomy 5 goes a little bit further and reminds us that we have to remember the Sabbath because we remember that we were slaves in the land of Egypt, and Yahweh brought us out from there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. So in this, the Sabbath is connected not only to creation, but it's also connected to the Exodus. And I'm going to have more to say about that today as we go into the new material. So I'll reserve my thoughts on that for the moment. And then Leviticus 23:3, which is Leviticus 23 being the chapter that talks about the major sacred seasons of the year, the Sabbath being the first one mentioned because it's a weekly special holy observance. It reminds us that we don't do any work on that day because it's a Sabbath to Yahweh in all of our dwellings. So these are three main passages where the Sabbath is mentioned. And then we looked at the fact that the scripture says that the Sabbath is a Sabbath to Yahweh, not just a Sabbath of Yahweh, meaning that it is something that is connected to Almighty Yahweh and is something that is done to honor Almighty Yahweh, to observe some important aspects of Almighty Yahweh. And we're going to talk a lot more about that today. Then we talk about Sabbath in Genesis 1 and how the first day began with darkness. The word is choshek in Hebrew. And then the light, or Yahweh brought into being. He creates an end to the darkness and creates the first day. And then every day is indicated by evening and then morning, the first day, second day, etc. But notice that we don't have that formula for the seventh day, right? Because when you end the sixth day, it was evening, there was morning, the sixth day, but then that formula is not used for the seventh day because it's a day that has, symbolically speaking, no beginning or end. It's a day that lasts forever. So you don't have that listed for the Sabbath day. And then I talked about the connection between the words wild and waste, or chaotic and desolate, right? So the scripture says in the Hebrew that in the beginning, when Yahweh was doing the creating, the earth was tohu vavohu. Well, tohu is this word chaotic, it has to do with the wilderness, disorder, unorder, chaotic. an unordered condition. Everything was in chaos. That's tohu. But then you also have vohu, which means it's uninhabited, it's empty, there are no residents. And the reason it's empty, uninhabited, no residents is because life can't really survive in a healthy fashion in an environment that is chaotic, in an environment that is wilderness. So the first thing that Yahweh did was to create order out of disorder. He removed the chaos, he removed the wilderness condition, and then when that was done, then he began to inhabit it with plant life and animal life, and ultimately human beings who represent the image of Elohim himself. And I showed you the different verses and how that compares. And then we talked about the patterns of 7 in the scriptures, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today as well, and how the number 7 is incredibly important in the scriptures. The number 7 indicating a complete cycle of time, 1 to 7, and then the eighth day, or the 8th number, begins the first of the next 7. It's a complete cycle. Okay. And you find that 7 infused throughout the sacred scriptures. And those of you who have been studying with me for a while know that very well, that you see 7 everywhere. And the interesting about that is because the 7 is evocative. It's meant to evoke. It's evoking the Sabbath day. So essentially, the 7 continually points us to the Sabbath. And that's very important to understand, very important to remember. It's like a thread throughout the entire scriptures from Genesis to Revelation. You see it in the Old Testament, but you see it in the New Testament as well. And it's more than just some nice little, cute little symbolism, right? There's a message that Almighty Yahweh is trying to convey to us. And by continually evoking the concept of the number 7, a complete cycle, and evoking the Sabbath, he's pointing us to what the Sabbath represents, which is ultimately what the entire Bible is pointing us to. It's pointing us, and people will say the number 7 is perfection, a cycle of completion of perfection. Yes, it's perfection, but it's more than that. Why is it perfect? Well, it's perfect, and I'm just going to give you the big picture, and then we're going to go back and start looking deeper and keep looking at the pieces to show to see how that bears out. The reason that 7 is the number of perfection is not so much because something was done and it was just done, right? It's perfection because the ultimate goal, the ultimate outcome that Yahweh wanted from the beginning was what? The ultimate outcome was to live, was Elohim to live with man, right? To be in intimate connection with humanity, and to do that in peace and safety and security. And that's what the Sabbath represents. It represents a time of intimacy between human beings, but also between human beings and their creator Yahweh. And by the way, by extension, all the rest of creation, right? So Yahweh and man are the main focal point of that, but all the animals, plant life, everything that exists is in truly perfect harmony. And that's what the Sabbath represents, a time of perfect harmony. It is the completion of all creation. It is the time where everything is settled in and you can now enjoy life the way that it was meant to be lived. Now, let's not look at that as just some nice poetic, the angels sang, right? Let's not look at it that way. Let's think about it, the reality of that. That's what everyone is seeking. That's what all of humanity is seeking. That's what you are seeking. That's what I'm seeking. Peace, safety, security. That's what we all want. That's the hole that we're all trying to fill in our lives. And sadly, because humanity, from the time of the fall forward into the present day, has sought all kinds of ways to reach that perfection, but outside of the ways of Yahweh, they can't find it. They can't find it. And because they can't find it, because they're not doing it They're not trying to reach that according to Yahweh's plan, according to Yahweh's way of doing things, according, as Yahweh said to Moses, according to the pattern that I showed you on Mount Sinai. Because they're not doing it that way, those ways of seeking perfection by their own strength and by their own will are bound to failure. And that's why we have such misery in the world. We have such misery in the world because people are trying to do it in their own way. So they'll seek after that perfection to fill that hole in their heart, which ultimately is about, I want peace, I want security, I want safety. They try to fill it through more money and the pursuit of money, through the pursuit of sex, through the pursuit of fame, and then all the corollaries that proceed from that. So you look for it through all the idolatry that exists in the world. So people will seek after, will seek to quell, to calm down, to quiet that voice within that's screaming for safety and peace. They try to quiet it down, and they try to do it through alcohol and drugs and pornography and gambling and fill in the blank, right? Pick your poison. Doesn't matter what it is. All the different ways that are available to men, to mankind, to humankind, all those ways are bound for failure because they can't fill. But those are the things that we seek after. But the only one who can fill all those things is Yahweh himself through his presence, through his intimate relationship with us. And that's what was disrupted at the fall. And that's what Yahweh has the entirety of the scriptures. The rest of the scriptures is the antidote, the solution to bring us back to the Garden of Eden, as symbolically representing that peace and intimacy and security that we want. And the Sabbath is the key to that, because the Sabbath is the moment at which that happened from the very beginning. What do I mean? Let me go back to the notes. So there are two words that are prominently found in the accounts of the Sabbath. And the first word I've already mentioned is the word Shabbat. Okay. So the word Shabbat, these are all the patterns of 7. The word Shabbat is the word that you find, let me see if I can find the scripture here, is the word that you will find, for example, in Genesis 2, verses 1 and 2, right? Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their hosts. On the seventh day, Elohim completed his work which he had done, and he rested. The Hebrew word is Shabbat. On the seventh day from all his work which he had done. So the word Shabbat literally means to cease. He stopped doing the work. He Shabbated. He stopped. Okay. You see that word also in Exodus 16, where it talks about the manna, and the manna ceased. It Shabbated. It ceased at some point, right? When Yahweh no longer wanted it to fall. But then you have this word here, the second word, for in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, and this is in Exodus 20, verse 11. Yahweh made the heavens and the earth for 6 days, and the sea and all that is in them, and rested. Different word. The English doesn't communicate it, but the Hebrew does. The Hebrew word is nuach. He rested, nuach, on the 7th day. Therefore, Yahweh blessed the Sabbath, Hebrew Shabbat day, and made it holy. Very important to understand that both those terms are being used, because the one indicates an action that just says he stopped. There was no more action taking place. What action? Work. And I mentioned last time, different words for work. One of the principal ones of them being avodah, work, which is the work that is the kind of the day-to-day work that you do. But melacha, which is the word that the scripture says specifically, explicitly, that you don't do any melacha on that day. The melacha is a little bit different. And the melacha, there are different ways to interpret it. I'm not going to go too deeply into that in this one, maybe in a future session. But the word melacha is work that has to do with the particular field in which you are contributing in the world, right? So whatever the gifts are that you have, that work that you do that contributes to the creation and that contributes to the continuing creation, that work that you do that contributes to mankind, that is that melacha. Avodah is a more general term that deals with the work that's being done in the day-to-day, that is the caretaking, the stewardship of the earth. So Yahweh said to to Adam and Eve that they would be caretakers of the earth. So let me go to that over in scriptures. There's so much going on here. Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, this is Genesis 1:28, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And so this ruling over these things requires a stewardship. It's a stewardship that they're to take care of these things. They're supposed to be, in other words, co-rulers with Yahweh, okay? So Yahweh completed his melacha. Notice that. Thus, this is Genesis 2. Thus, the heavens and the earth were completed and all their hosts. By the seventh day, Elohim completed his melacha, which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his melacha, which he had done. Then Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested, Shabbat, from all his work. He stopped from his melacha. He stopped from all his work, which Elohim had created and made. So we also have to stop from the melacha. So that's going to merit deeper explanation in a future session, a little bit more about melacha and how that works, okay, the different types of work. But the bottom line is that man was given stewardship over the earth. This word here, cultivate, for Yahweh Elohim had not sent rain upon the earth, and there was no man to cultivate the ground. You look down below, lower left, the word avad, okay? Avad, cultivate, to work the ground. That's the kind of work I'm talking about, the stewardship in the day-to-day, putting things in order, you see, keeping the order, keeping things from turning back to chaos. That's what man is supposed to do. And what happened after the fall? Well, after the fall, everything that had come easily, Yahweh was giving abundance. So what happens on the seventh day, he stops from his work, and it says that he Shabbats, he stops, but then it says in the other passage in Exodus 20, for in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. So we know from Genesis 2 and other places that he Shabbated, he ceased from doing the work, from doing the melacha. But we also know that after the 6 days, after he did all these things, he rested nuach on the seventh day. So the term nuach has a connotation not of ceasing. The term nuach has a connotation of settling down, of resting, of admiring everything that you're doing. You're being settled in place. In other words, the Hebrew word for Noah, that's his name. His name means Noach. His name is a variation of that, Noach, right? And we're going to look at that a little bit later when we look at Noah and then the Patriarchs. So Noach, he was going to give comfort. He was going to give rest. It all points back to that, you see. It's all taking us back to what Yahweh initially intended. So the term Noach gives an impression of Yahweh being in his settled temple now, because remember that the creation story is the account of a temple being created. And that temple is where Yahweh's glory is going to go out to the earth, and it's going to be reflected back, and then the praise of mankind is going to be reflected back to him. So his presence is going to fill the earth. So this is his abode, right? So he, in a symbolic sense, so he sits in his temple. Now that the creation is done, he stops from the work and he sits in his temple. Everything is safe and secure. And now he exercises his stewardship over the entire earth in a safe and secure location. And mankind celebrates it every week on the Sabbath, when they also sit it's settled at peace in a secure location. And now they can enjoy the fruits of their labors and continue to rule together with Almighty Yahweh. It's a beautiful arrangement. It's a picture meant to show complete harmony between mankind and the animals and the plants and everything else on the earth. But of course, it was all thrown asunder by the fall. Because one of the things that is a prerequisite for that peace and security and safety is trust in Yahweh. And because man did not trust in Yahweh and instead tried to do things through his own thing, right? Yahweh provided everything for him. Yahweh provided everything for mankind. There was abundance, superflowing abundance. And yet mankind wanted to seek its own way and have that abundance in its own way. And because of that fall, that lack of trust and that fall, we were cursed to not have that easy abundance that we had before. And from that time to the present day, we're trying to get back to Eden, so to speak, trying to get back to a pre-fall condition where we can have that intimacy with Yahweh again. And I can go on and on about this, but I'm going to move on, but you get the picture. So the idea is for us to have Nuach once again. And the Sabbath is a weekly reminder that we're supposed to have Nuach. We're supposed to have comfort. And it's loaded throughout the scriptures. That language is loaded. I mentioned to you the connection with Isaiah 40. Comfort ye, my people, right? The word is a derivative of, there's a connection, not a derivative per se, but there's an etymological connection between that word for comfort and the name of Noah and this word Nuach. So the announcing of the coming Holy One, right? The announcing of the Messiah is an announcement that comfort is on its way, you see, and that fulfillment of comfort is on its way. And all of it is connected through these terms to the Sabbath. And the number 7 pointing to the Sabbath, because what is this? What is the seventh day? That's the Sabbath. So the whole idea is to continually point us to the Sabbath until we finally reach the Sabbath, the final big Sabbath where mankind and where humanity and Yahweh and all of creation are once again together. So it's new creation that we're talking about, new creation as represented by the Sabbath. So when we start quibbling about, well, we got to keep the Sabbath and we got all these restrictions and we're missing the point. We're missing the point. Noah settling down, looking back at the work done, as a steward contemplating the work done and how it's functioning. Exactly. Much like a farmer planting seeds, watering, then resting, or Noah waiting on the seeds, water, and sun to do their thing. Exactly. Someone just sent me a comment separately. That's exactly the idea. Yeah, we'll say more about it as we go along. But the idea is for us to get back to a condition of Nuach, to a condition of resting with Almighty Yahweh. Okay. So let's go back to the notes. I was talking about this before. The Hebrew word Shabbat means cease from. Elohim ceases from his work because it's finished. Compare with Yahshua 5:12. So the incident occurred in Exodus 16, but the verse I was looking for is in Yahshua 5:12. The manna ceased Shabbat on that day. The Hebrew Noach means to take up residence. You see that? So why is that happening? Why? The fall created a condition of exile. So if you look at the Exodus and the connection in the Exodus to creation, remember the difference between Genesis and not Genesis, between the verses of Sabbath in Exodus and Deuteronomy. Exodus points us to creation, and then Deuteronomy gives us the other connection, which is to the Exodus. So the connection is that the Exodus, is the exile, right? The condition before the Exodus period of time represents the period of exile, which is the banishment from Eden, the banishment from a condition of Nuach. It represents the exile from Eden, represents a return to the wilderness, a return to Tohu, right? The earth had been Tohu, wilderness, wild, desert, chaotic, and uninhabited, Vohu, Tohu vavohu, and Yahweh, through the creation, eliminated that and turned it into a flourishing, beautiful residential garden, right? But the exile represents a banishment and a return to the wilderness. And the Exodus situation with Israel in Egypt represents the same thing. It is Israel in chaos. It's Israel as if Israel, representative of humanity. Remember when we talked about the new humanity, we talked about the different concentric circles and the story of Israel. Well, the story of Israel is a story of humanity's banishment into exile, into the garden, out of the garden, and back into chaos, back into a pre-garden condition, back into Tohu. And we have to get back to a condition of order. And that can only be done through Yahshua the Messiah, who is our rest, you see. All right, We're going to see more of this as we go through here. But I just want you to have the big picture. When Elohim, the Hebrew Nuach means to take up residence. Compare with Exodus 10:14. The locust came up over the land of Egypt and rested, Nuach and all the land. So even the locust rested, right? When Elohim or people Nuach, it always involves settling into a place that is safe, secure, and stable. 2 Samuel 7:1. Now King David dwelt in his house, for Yahweh had provided rest from his enemies. Okay. And then we talk about blessings, etc. And we ended right around here. So let's start with Genesis 2-3 and the failure to obtain Sabbath rest. So as I said, I'm going to go through the notes and use that as my basis and give you my own commentary as we go through that. So it's still in the Genesis story. So Genesis 2-3 and the failure to obtain Sabbath rest. At the pinnacle of the second creation account found in Genesis 2 and 3, Elohim places the human in the garden so he can work it and keep it. Let me say one more thing before we continue. The Sabbath is inconvenient. There, I said it. Brought it out in the open. Is the Sabbath inconvenient? Sure it is. It represents the full stop from all your activities. You can't go to school during the Sabbath. You can't go and do your regular work during the Sabbath. Many of the activities that you would normally engage in during the week, you won't be doing. You won't be buying and selling on the Sabbath. It is a major interruption to your week. Here's the thing. That's the point. That's the point. It's supposed to be inconvenient. That's something we should celebrate, not vilify. That's the point. Why is it supposed to be inconvenient? Because it's a pattern break. From what? From us as human beings thinking that we own our time. We do not. That's the hard part for us to grasp. That's why the world will never accept the Sabbath, because they don't get this, neither would they accept it if they did get it. Because in humanity's thing, we do our own thing. Remember, I've told you many times, there's this poem called Invictus that I absolutely despise. It's the one that says, I am the captain of my soul. I am the, I forget exactly what all the words are. It's a lie. And it represents exactly why mankind is in miserable shape that it is. It sounds all noble and wonderful. And it's a lie and a deceit and a deception. We are not captains of our own soul. We are subservient to Almighty Yahweh. We are subordinate to Almighty Yahweh, gladly subservient to Almighty Yahweh, because it's He who controls our lives. It's He who breathed life into us. It's He that could remove that breath of life in just a moment. And we owe all our allegiance and loyalty to Him, and all sovereignty belongs to Him, period, end of discussion. And the Sabbath is a weekly reminder that all sovereignty belongs to Yahweh, and we are creatures of Yahweh, and not captains of our own selves, and not individuals who do whatever we want with our time whenever we want. And by the way, the sacred seasons during the course of the year serve for the same function. They teach us spiritual lessons about the plan of Almighty Yahweh for humanity, and they're strategically positioned throughout the year to have perfect breaks, pattern breaks throughout the course of the year, to remember before we start thinking too highly of ourselves and all the money we're making and all the influence that we're peddling and all the blah, 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 and opulence and everything else. And then Yahweh says, stop, stop, stop. And remember this, remember this, remember this. And the Sabbath is a weekly reminder, right? That we don't own our time. We don't own ourselves. We're stewards under Almighty Yahweh. And because of that, the Sabbath is meant to be inconvenient. Now, inconvenient doesn't mean not desirable. It doesn't have to be, right? It's just that we do things differently on the Sabbath than we do the rest of the time, because we acknowledge Yahweh's sovereignty week by week, so that we never forget, and so that we always remember that there's a greater purpose for us being here, and it's not to make money or to be powerful or to do whatever, right? Ultimately, we serve Yahweh for His honor and glory, to reflect His glory throughout the earth. So at the pinnacle of the second creation account found in Genesis 2 and 3, Yahweh places the human in the garden so He can work it and keep it. In the Hebrew, the word place is actually nuach, or rest. So this is Genesis 2, 1-2. Then Yahweh Elohim took the human, and most versions will say, and placed him into the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. But it's interesting. the word placed is actually this word, nuach. So in other words, he instead of placed, I think it would be more proper to say he settled him into the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And by the way, notice this is very important. Notice, very interesting. And let's go to that verse in the not the concordance, in the accordance here. I want you to see something here that I think is very interesting. This is Genesis 2, verse 8. Yahweh Elohim planted a garden toward the east in Eden, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. Here it is. Okay. 2:15, I think, is what he wanted. Then Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. Okay. So in 2 verse, let's just clarify that. So in 2 verse 8, he uses the word sim, placed the man. So that's accurate. But then in 2:15, he uses the different word, right? Then Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. And if you look in the lower left here, that word put here is nuach. So the idea is that he settled him into the garden, much like on the seventh day, he settled and watched over everything and saw that everything was good, and he's resting in a settled and secure place. This is the condition in which mankind would ideally live with Yahweh, in a condition of being nuacht in the garden. And the point I wanted to bring out here was not just that he's settled into the garden, that he's resting, that he's comfortable in the garden, but he's working it, right? Then Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. So the word cultivate, as I said before, is this word avad. So you can translate this word to work it and keep it. So the point I wanted to make here was that nuach includes this work, right? This is part of the beauty of this condition of living. There's no conflict between work and Sabbath in this sense of being settled and living life, because the Sabbath represents life itself, right? It represents man being settled in this garden at peace, secure, safe, working, cultivating the land and doing his thing, right? This is why I make a distinction between the work in a general sense and this melacha. So that bears looking at more deeply at some future point. So I'm not saying this that if people have gardens, they should be working on the Sabbath in gardens, right? Although I don't know that I'd have a problem with that, but that's a discussion for another day. But that's not the point of my discussion. My point is, it's kind of interesting that you have a condition in which man is nuaching, right? Just to use the Hebrew, he's nuaching, he's settled, and yet part of that nuach, part of that comfort, part of that rest, that security, is it involves avodah, work, right? But it's work of a specific type, of being a steward over the earth. So that's something that's worth returning to later, okay? Let's go back to the notes. So if you have made a copy of this, make sure you change that, because that's 2:15. Said more accurately, Yahweh rests or settles the human in the garden so that he can work it. The biblical portrait of rest actually includes work. So what happens next in the story? Humanity rebels and finds themselves exiled from the Garden of Eden, sent to work/labor the ground. But now it's not the ease of abundance that happened before. So work is not a problem. Sometimes people will say that man was cursed to work and to now do work. No, work was never a curse. Work was never a curse. What became a curse was the fact that it would no longer be easy for him, right? It would no longer be easy abundance, right? You drop a seed and boom, the thing is coming up already. I'm exaggerating, but something like that. It's like never-ending ease of abundance. Now, chaos enters the picture again, right? Now wilderness enters the picture again. You have the inverted tree now with the roots and the thorns and the thistles. Cursed is the ground because of you. Though through painful toil, that's the curse. It's the painful toil. It's not the work itself. It's the painful toil. And isn't that what we all go through in our lives? It's like a constant painful toil. Like we're struggling all the time. Even when we have moments of respite, it's, we're always thinking about the work that needs to be done and all the problems associated with it and getting it done. That's the curse. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. Notice that, all the days of your life. It's going to be with us to the day that we die. That's why for people to chase the pipe dream of no anxiety and peace in this condition in which we live now, it's futile. And that's why we turn to all those things that I mentioned earlier to try to numb the pain, right? We're numbing the painful toil that we have to go through instead of recognizing it for what it is and allowing ourselves to go with it, right? To dance with it. And on the Sabbath day, we rest, we get a break. And on the holy days, we remember there's something greater than this. My friends, until the day that we die, we're going to be involved in painful toil. Doesn't mean that we have to be agonizing or suffering about it, but we have to recognize that that's the human condition so that we don't kill ourselves trying to do things of our own free will, of our own strength, and not relying on Yahweh. That's the problem with working on the Sabbath or ignoring Yahweh's will. It continues to perpetuate that lack of trust that brought us to this problem in the first place. So on the Sabbath, when we stop and we acknowledge Yahweh's sovereignty over our lives, we practice, we become rehearsed, we become exercised in acknowledging that Yahweh's rule over our lives is all that matters. So going back to this, cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. And that until you return to the ground part was not supposed to be either, right? Because we were supposed to live forever. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Genesis 3:17-19. Humanity's new reality is void of the rest, of the nuach that Yahweh intended for his creation. And that's what we struggle for. That is what, when I talk about the void that is in us, that's the void that I'm talking about. We long for the nuach. Don't you hear people say, "Oh, I just want peace. I just want to live in peace. I just want to, not every waking moment be thinking about all the problems." And that's what we're talking about. People are longing for the nuach. And that nuach was found in intimacy with Almighty Yahweh. But because of the fall, the adversary in the fall robbed us of the peace of the nuach. And we're trying to get that back, you see. But we have to do it through Yahweh's plan and not through our own strength, because we can't do it through our own strength. Humanity's new reality is void of the rest Elohim intended for his creation. How is Elohim going to restore the Eden Sabbath? I love that term, the Eden Sabbath. Sabbath/Eden themes in Genesis 4-50. In other words, throughout the rest of Genesis. And now it gets really interesting. Elohim embarks on a project with the family of Abraham for new creation and a new Sabbath. But it's not just about one family. Through them, Elohim will restore his blessing to the nations and all creation. That's what you see in Genesis 12, where Abraham is told, through you, all the nations will be blessed, right? The remainder of Genesis includes key stories that move Elohim's plan forward. And by the way, it's not technically through Abraham, right? Through you, because it's through Abraham's descendant seed, who? Way down the line, Yahshua the Messiah, who proceeds from Jacob, who proceeds from Abraham, you see. It's no surprise the remainder of Genesis includes, so through you, Abraham, is not really you, Abraham. Through you, Abraham, your descendant, Yahshua, all the nations will be blessed. That's why there was so much turmoil in the early assemblies between Jew and Gentile, because once again, the adversary, as from the very beginning, was instigating to continue to cause friction between Jew and Gentile, and turmoil between, distrust and suspicion between different ethnic groups, etc. And by the way, that carried forth into the present day, right? It's not just Jew and Gentile. It's everything we see today with regard to all the racist situations and all that. It's all the same. It's all about pitting humanity one against the other, right? I'm better than you, and I'm better, I'm superior and you're inferior, right? It's the same stupidity that has plagued mankind. And Yahweh worked through Yahshua the Messiah to eliminate that foolishness, you see. So let's go back to the notes. It's no surprise that these passages are riddled with patterns of 7, reminding us that this whole story is aimed at a Sabbath rest in the new creation. I want to repeat that. These passages are riddled with patterns of 7, reminding us that this whole story is aimed at a Sabbath rest. It's aimed at a Sabbath rest in the new creation. Let's take a look at a couple of examples from the life of Noah and Abraham. Noah's story. In Hebrew, Noah's name actually means rest, Noach. His story takes him from, and get this, his story takes him from the wilderness of exile from Eden, through the flood waters of death, to rest on the cosmic mountain. Does that blow your mind? Blows my mind. Now he called his name, this is Genesis 5:29, he called his name Noach, saying this one, look what he said to Noah. Don't take anything for granted that's written in scripture, because it's all there for a reason. He said, this one will give us comfort. Yenachamenu. This one will give us comfort. It's the word Nuach, Yenachamenu. It's a version of Nuach. From our work and from the toil of our hands arising from the ground which Yahweh has cursed. That's mind-blowing to me. Let's go look at that in a different version. This is his own personal translation. So that's Genesis 5:29. Now he called his name Noach, saying, this one, so it says essentially the same thing. This one will give us rest. Nacham, right? Nacham. That's the cognate, the variation of Noach. Noach, he'll give us Nacham, rest. So when you go to, remember I said Isaiah 40, comfort ye, my people. That's what, right? So let's take a quick look at that. And what is this? This is the gospel, right? Isaiah 40, Isaiah 57, 2 important passages that constitute the gospel, the announcing of the kingdom, right? Comfort, oh, comfort my people. What's the word? Look at the lower left. Nacham, right? Same situation. Comfort, oh, comfort my people, says your Elohim. Speak kindly to Jerusalem and call out to her that her warfare has ended, that her iniquity has been removed, that she has received of Yahweh's hand double for all her sins. A voice is calling, clear the way for Yahweh in the wilderness. In the what? In the wilderness. It's the wilderness, the tohu, right? It's the confusion, the midbar. The word, look at the word for wilderness down below, lower left, midbar. The midbar, in the wilderness, the first words of Deuteronomy. Clear the way for Yahweh in the wilderness, in the desert. Make smooth in the desert a highway for Elohim. What is that about? It's about creating order from chaos, order from tohu, right? It's going to be smoothed again. Who's going to be smooth? Who is this speaking of? It's speaking of the coming one, the one who's going to make everything smooth again, the one who's going to remove the wilderness condition. Let every valley be lifted up, every mountain and hill be made low. He's rearranging, reshaping the landscape, just like he did at the very beginning with all of creation. This is symbolism, right? He's going to reshape, and one day it will be actually physical again, yes? But it's symbolic. All the chaos is being reshaped and reformed once again to the smooth condition of order. Every mountain and hill will be made low. The world will be turned upside down in a good way. Everything that you thought was low is going to be made high, and everything that was high is going to be made low, right? The mountain will be made low. Babylon, right? The Tower of Babel, which is a ziggurat going to the heavens, mankind trying to do things in their own strength, creating their own mountain, if you will. And Yahweh says, it's Psalm 2 type of stuff. He laughs them to derision, right? And he says, what are you doing? I've installed my king in my holy mountain. This is nonsense. Every mountain and hill will be made low. Let the rough ground become a plain and the rugged terrain a broad valley. Then the glory of Yahweh will be revealed, right? Because Yahweh's glory, Yahweh lives with us, Emmanuel. He lives in intimacy with mankind in a renewed creation, yes? The glory of Yahweh will be revealed, and all flesh will see it together, for the mouth of Yahweh has spoken. And he goes on from there. O Zion, bearer of good news, get yourself up on a high mountain of O Zion, bearer of good news. Lift up your voice mightily, O Jerusalem, bearer of good news. Lift it up, do not fear. Say to the cities of Judah, here is your Elohim. Behold, Yahweh Elohim will come with might, with his arm ruling for him. Who is his arm? Yahshua. Behold, his reward is with him and his recompense before him. Like a shepherd, he will tend his flock. In his arm, he will gather the lambs and carry them in his bosom. He'll restore the peace, the nuach, to the lambs. Right? What was Yahshua doing on the hills of Judah? It says that they came to him. They were like sheep without shepherd, and he fed them. Right? He'll carry them in his bosom. He will gently lead the nursing ewes. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand and marked off the heavens by the span and calculated the dust of the earth by the measure? Where have you seen language like this before? Proverbs 8, right? Lady Wisdom, who represents Yahshua, Lady Wisdom calculates everything and uses a compass, and she does this and that and marks off the heavens and calculates the dust of the earth and weighed the mountains in a balance and the hills in a pair of scales. What are we talking here? We're talking creation, right? New creation in this case. So Isaiah 40 and 52, 7 forward. How lovely on the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who announces what? Peace, shalom, and brings good news of happiness, who announces salvation, Yeshua, right? And says to Yahweh, and says to Zion, your Elohim reigns. Yahweh is sovereign. Break forth, shout joyfully together, you waste places of Jerusalem, for Yahweh has what? Comforted his people, Nachem. He has redeemed Jerusalem. Yahweh has bared his holy arm in the sight of all the nations, that all the ends of the earth may see the salvation, Yeshua, of our Elohim, right? And on it goes. So let's go back to Genesis 5:29. So this one, Noah, this one will give us, why? Because Noah was a righteous man. He was a type of Yahshua the Messiah, right? This one will give us rest. And there were many types of Yahshua, right? Abraham, Jacob, Noah, and others down the line. But all of them fell short, right? Because they weren't Yahshua himself. This one will give us rest from our work. This one will give us nachem from our work. From our work? And from the toil of our hands arising from the ground which Yahweh has cursed. That's a very unusual thing to say. This one will give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands arising from the ground which Yahweh has cursed. In other words, this one will give us rest from the curse. This one will bring us back to rest, right? Let's go back to some of the other notes here. In the 7th month, on the 17th, which is literally 710, right? Which is in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. Genesis 8:4. So notice, remember what he said here. His story Noah's story takes him from the wilderness of exile from Eden. That's where he was. He was in the midst of a wilderness condition. All the people around him were doing evil. Remember Genesis 6? I was about to say Noah 6. I thought that ain't the book. Genesis 6, where you had all the evil that was being done and violence that was being done. And Noah, among them, alone was found to be righteous, right? He's in a wilderness of exile from Eden. He goes through the flood waters of death. The flood waters representing death. What is that? It's baptism, right? And then you come up out of the waters of baptism and you're alive. Through the flood waters of death to rest on the cosmic mountain. Eden was represented, is in effect a mountainous area. You're back on the mountain. Everything, the temple was meant to bring you back to Eden. The temple was on a mount, right? It wasn't a flat place. Eden was a mount to rest on the cosmic mountain. So it's a return to Eden. And you see this all throughout scriptures, right? Let's just take a look at a couple of things here. So you can see how the line, when people think that the scriptures are some old dusty book, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. It's a supernatural creation over thousands of years. Now it will come about, Isaiah 2, 2. Now it will come about that in the last days, the mountain of the house of Yahweh will be established at the chief of the mountains and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. And many peoples will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. And then, of course, you have this repeated in Micah 4. And it will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of Yahweh will be established. It's the exact same language, right? But you see this all throughout the scriptures. Mount Zion, right? What is Mount Zion? Well, Mount Zion is great is Yahweh and greatly to be praised. Psalm 48. In the city of our Elohim, his holy mountain, beautiful in elevation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great king. Elohim and her palaces has made himself known as a stronghold. Iskav. What is this mountain? It's Sinai, right? Eden, Sinai, Zion. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Daniel, the dream of the Nebuchadnezzar. Then the iron, 235. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold, the last kingdom of men, were crushed all at the same time and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone, the Evan, father and son, right? But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. It's everywhere, right? Let's go back to the notes. This is Genesis 8, 6 to 13. I'm not going to read all this, but this is Noah, right? At the end of 40 days, that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. He sent out a raven, then he sent out a dove to see if the water was abated from the face of the earth. But the dove found no resting place, manoach. He found no resting place. He found no nuach. There was no peace there. So what happens? For the sole of her foot, so she returned to him to the ark. For the water was on the surface of all the earth. What is the water, right? The water is covering the earth again. We're back to a pre-creation condition, right? When the waters covered the face of the earth and everything was tohu vavohu. You see this? It's pre-creation again, because Yahweh's doing a new creation. He's renewing the earth, right? And the water, everything under the water represents everything that's dead, right? Baptism. You're under the water, you're buried, you're dead. You're up out of the water, you're resurrected. Romans 6, the chapter on baptism. Here's another one. 1 Corinthians 10, for I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and the rock was Messiah. They all passed through the sea. They all passed symbolically through death, and they were raised to a new life. They went from the exile, wilderness, chaos, and then they went instead through the waters of baptism, through the waters of death, the ark going once again through the waters, and then coming out to the mountain for life, new life, you see, out of exile. And it's a repetition throughout the scriptures, the pattern that Yahweh has shown again and again. Okay, let's go back to this year. So Genesis 8, continuing, the sole of her foot she returned into the ark, for the water was on the surface of all the earth. Then he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark to himself. So he waited yet another, how long? Another 7 days. And again, he sent out the dove from the ark. The dove came to him toward evening, and behold, in her beak was a freshly picked olive leaf. Getting closer. And it's an olive leaf. I can go into all sorts of tangents there. So no one knew that the water was abated from the earth, but he waited yet another 7 days and sent out the dove, but she did not return to him again. Now it came about in the 601st year, in the first month, on the first of the month. What is the first month? The first month is the Passover month. Boy, we're just getting started. We're getting started. The water was dried up from the earth. The waters were separated, right? The creation story, once again. Yahweh separates the waters from the land, from the dry land. Then Noah removes the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the surface of the ground was dried up. 7 days, another 7 days. And by the way, what is that? He doesn't say this, but in my interpretation, when I look at that, didn't have it, then sent out for another 7 days. Didn't have it, another 7 days, right? And there are periods of 7 up until the point where the dove doesn't return anymore because now it's time. Yes. The 7, again, is pointing us towards the Sabbath. It's pointing us towards peace. It's pointing us towards Nuach. But while we're in a condition of wilderness, of chaos, of exile, you can't have that peace. The exiles in Babylon said, how can we sing the songs of Zion in this land? There's no peace here. We can't sing the songs of Zion. We can't be cheerful in exile. We can't have a Sabbath in exile. We're pointing towards the Sabbath with the 7. So when you go to these notes and you see from Genesis 8, 7 days, 7 days, it's like us now, the way I see it. It's like week by week, Sabbath to Sabbath, we get a refresher and a refresher and a refresher, but we're not there yet. We get a taste of it. We get a sense of what it would be like to have that peace. And there are moments of peace, but we're not ready to come out of the ark yet because we still need Yahweh's protection and safety. We're under his protection and his guidance, sheltering us until the time when it's right, when we could finally come out of the ark and keep on going, right? We're not there yet. So there are all kinds of lessons that we could be learning from here. Let's look a little bit at Abraham. Genesis chapters 3 to 11 tell of humanity's downward spiral away from Elohim. That's exactly right. Genesis 3 is when the serpent deceives Eve and Adam. And then we continue, right? 4 is Cain and Abel, the first introduction of violence. So there's a deterioration into violence. You see, it's a continual deterioration from order and habitability to disorder and wildness once again, and uninhabitability, you see. Mankind becomes corrupted in their thinking. And in Genesis 5, it continues with Lamech and all these people, right? And if Cain did this thing, for Lamech, it's going to be even worse, right? And then it goes on and on. And then notice how the lifespan becomes less and less. Methuselah is like 965 years old, something like that. And then it goes down and down and down until you're down to much less years, because the deterioration is such that mankind can't live as long as they had before. They still live pretty long, but it gets shorter and shorter. And then Genesis 6 is all the terrible stuff happening with violence and sexual sin and all kinds of things that are happening in Noah's time. And then Yahweh says, enough's enough. And then 7 through 9 is the account of Noah. And then 10, now we're starting to build things up again. And then you have the Table of Nations and Babylon, right? And then Babylon starts to come into full force. And we start returning again to wilderness again. And then we get to Genesis 11, and that's Tower of Babel. Mankind's trying to do everything on their own. The ziggurat goes up into the sky. Yahweh confuses their speech and scatters them. And then in Genesis 12, we have a new Noah, right? A new Adam. We have Adam, he fails. Noah, he fails. Then we have a new Noah, Abraham. And then from 12 forward, a plan goes into motion that eventually culminates in Yahshua the Messiah, but not without a lot of pain and failure in between. So Genesis chapters 3 to 11 tell of humanity's downward spiral away from Elohim. Yes, in chapter 12, we meet Abraham, who enters into a unique relationship with Yahweh. Elohim's promise to Abraham in Genesis 12, 1 to 3 includes 7 lines with 5 blessings to match the 5 curses in Genesis 3. That's amazing too. 12, 1 to 3 includes 7 lines with 5 blessings to match the 5 curses in Genesis 3. Blows my mind. We don't have time to go into that right now, but if you compare, you see certain aspects of that, the blessings and the curses. Now Yahweh said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. It's a reversal of the wilderness condition. It's a reversal of exile. Abraham responds with trust, right? That's very important because Adam did not trust. Abraham responds with trust and embarks on the journey toward the land Elohim would show him. So now he's going towards the land, symbolically, right? He's going towards the land. What land? The land of Canaan. But it's more than Canaan, right? It's not just some patch of land in what we know as the Middle East. It's Eden, once again, right? It's symbolic. Because Eden is not just concentrated in that little piece of, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the physical, literal meaning of it. It's going to the place that represents Eden, the place where Yahweh puts his name, and the place that will be the headquarters when Yahweh has the nations flock to that place after everything is said and done, yes? So in Genesis 21, we read about a location along the way. So this is another thing here. In Genesis 21, we read about a location along the way, Beersheba, which means well of seven, well as in water well of seven. Get this. Elohim provides miraculous water in the desert for Hagar the Egyptian and her child at the well of seven. And then the verse is there. If you don't have these notes, I urge you to get a copy of them. Abraham then makes peace with the nations at the well of seven by sacrificing, you guessed it, 7 sheep and planting a tree at the well of seven. Genesis 21, 22 to 33. So he's already fulfilling the substance of what Yahweh promised him by making peace with the nations symbolically at the well of seven. Years later, during Joseph's story, the characters experience what? 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine in Genesis 42 to 47. Why the subtle and not so subtle inclusions of patterns of seven? The author is trying to show us that Yahweh is on the move, looking to restore humanity to the seventh day of looking to restore humanity to seventh day rest. It's all interconnected, all interconnected. Okay, let's look at a slightly different angle now, just a few more minutes. I'm only going to go to 6:30 today. The Exodus as Sabbath liberation. The next major movement in the biblical narrative is the Exodus from Egypt. It should come as no surprise that the Exodus story is presented in cosmic terms in analogy with the creation story. And we kind of already knew that because we saw the account in Exodus 20 of the Sabbath that relates it to creation, and then the account in Deuteronomy 5, which relates it to the Exodus. Here's how the story goes. The powers of evil, Egypt, have left the new humanity, Israel, in a state of destruction through slavery. And this is fascinating. Literally working, avodah. What is the word that was used for cultivating the garden? Avodah. But the word for slavery is also this word related to this work, avodah. So there is a twisting, a turning upside its head of something that was good for mankind, avodah, working, but it was twisted to work for the Egyptians. So because of evil and because of a fallen human condition. So I like the way he puts it here, the powers of evil, Egypt. Remember I explained to you when we were talking about Yahshua that he, on the cross, he drew all the powers and all the nuances of evil to himself, and he killed it at the cross. And that allows the new humanity to come into place. That allows spirit to do its work so that the new humanity, away from the powers of evil, can flourish. You're distracted by the evil and by all the things that are contrary to Almighty Yahweh, and you draw it all to yourself, which is what Yahshua did, and then once and for all he takes care of it and he destroys it so that humanity can get back to an abundant life. It's the same reason why he healed and why he exorcised demons, right? Because that was part of the process of removing the evil from the world. He removed sickness, and he removed all the powers that were working against mankind in terms of the demons and in terms of mental illness and all those things that were causing grief for mankind. And he brought it all together to destroy it symbolically, right? Not symbolically, in actuality. But we're still fighting a battle today because we're in a cleanup operation, as I've explained many times. But through Yahshua, we already have the victory. It's just that time has to do its thing. The powers of evil have left the new humanity, Israel, in a state of destruction through slavery. So the work that was, remember, the avodah in the garden was part of the nuach. It was part of the rest of being settled in a beautiful garden. And instead it's been corrupted to a slavery. Israel passes through the waters of death, the sea, and into new life, the promised land. But first, Elohim brings 10 plagues against Egypt. Now, in this chapter here, in this chart, he's not showing every single plague. We could go back and examine every single plague, but we won't do that. But he gives some examples here. The 10 plagues function as inversions of the 10 creative words of Elohim in Genesis 1. That's mind-blowing. All of the plagues decreate Egypt back to chaotic darkness. So Egypt is systematically taken apart to make it the wilderness and chaos that it is. Take a look at the similarities between these passages. So if you look at Genesis 1, these are a few examples. 1, 2 to 3, and darkness, choshech, was over the surface of the deep. And Elohim said, let there be light, Yehi Or. Exodus 10, 21, 23, let there be darkness, Yehi choshech, darkness, over the land of Egypt. But for all the sons of Israel, there was light, Haya Or, in their dwellings. So he's making a distinction between the holy and the profane. So Egypt was wilderness. And he said, okay, you want wilderness? Have wilderness, because you want to do evil. You want to do things totally contrary to my word. You're going to see what it is to be without my word. You want to follow the idols, which are representatives of the evil of this world, then you're going to see what the idols give. The idols don't give or, they give choshech. They don't give light, they give darkness. So Genesis 1, 2 to 3, that's what the way he says they decreate, the plagues decreate Egypt. In other words, you're going to eat the fruit of your distrust and your disobedience, and you're going to be reverting back to wilderness. Whereas the children of Israel, if they obey me and they move forward, they're going to see the acts of creation that are taking place on their behalf, because this is Yahweh's will for mankind and for humanity, that there be light in their dwellings. And he made a distinction, a separation between the light and the darkness. Genesis 1:20, let the waters swarm with every swarming creature. Exodus 8:3, the Nile will swarm with frogs. Genesis 1:29 to 30, I have given to you for food all vegetation, all the trees which have the fruit of the tree, every green thing. Exodus 10:5, the locust will eat every tree which sprouts for you from the field. There'll be no trees. They'll all be eaten. Genesis 2 verse 9, in other words, it's something that's a resident, the locust, but they're turning it into chaos and emptiness and waste and void. Genesis 2:9, and Yahweh sprouted from the ground every tree. Exodus 10:15, fruit of the tree, all vegetation in the tree and green thing in the field. This is connected to the locust. And we can go back and look at each of those plagues, and you'd see some connection back to the condition of creation. Okay, excuse me. A couple more things will be done. So he's speaking about darkness here, and he goes a little bit more in depth. The 10th and final plague corresponds to the provision of the Passover meal and takes place when? At night. Pharaoh also sends Israel out of Egypt at night. And these are all the verses. I won't go through all those. These circumstances give a nod to the darkness found in Genesis 1:2. Now that Egypt has been reduced back to the pre-creation state, the pre-creation state, the parting of the waters replays Genesis 1:2 as the eternal spirit brings new creation, right? So this is what Yahweh does with Israel. It's just like we see in 1 Corinthians 10. He passes them through the waters. He splits the waters and he makes the dry land. That's creation, right? But he doesn't do it for Egypt. For Egypt, the waters come back down over them and cover them. They're covered once again with the primordial waters of death and back to Tohu. The story continues as Israel flees to the edge of the Red Sea, where Pharaoh's army chases them for a nighttime showdown. I love that. Exodus 14:10. It's also at night that Yahweh parts the waters. There it is. During the last watch of the night, Exodus 14:24, The Egyptians falter in the midst of the sea, and at sunrise, the waters destroy the Egyptians while the Israelites flourish on dry land. And then promise of Sabbath rest. And then you go straight from 14 to 15. And look at 15. Exodus 15 is a song. Remember Miriam and the women, is a song about Israel going into the land to be planted on a cosmic mountain to be in Yahweh's presence. That's Noah, right? That's Noah and the ark and coming out on top. That's Zion, Isaiah 2, Micah 4, the mountain of Yahweh's house being established. You blew with your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you among the Elohim, O Yahweh? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in praises, working wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. In your loving kindness, you have led the people whom you have redeemed. In your strength, you have guided them. Where? To your holy habitation. Notice, you will bring them and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place of your dwelling. And the place of your dwelling, the term dwelling there is shipteka, which is related to the word Sabbath, which you have made, the place of your dwelling, which you have made, the sanctuary, O Yahweh, which your hands have established. Yahweh shall reign forever and ever. That's Exodus 15, 10 to 18. Mind-blowing, mind-blowing. If you're not moved by that, I want you to have a better meditation, because that needs to blow your mind. And then we're going to stop here. The significance of Passover, unleavened bread, and creation. We'll look at this starting next time, Yahweh willing. All right. But seriously, I hope that that you're finding this interesting, and I hope that is encouraging you. And as we go through it more and more, and you see, and I know I'm throwing a lot at you at once, right? So hope it hopefully is clear, and you can always review the video when it comes out, and I hope that's going to encourage us to keep pressing forward, because this is good stuff.